My name is Kristen Aro, co-chair of the Warren Pond Task Force, and I'm calling this public meeting to order at 5:10. I'll take a roll call of the task members present. Why we started that in today?
Steve Hannon, Paul Bone, Mark Howell,
Delia Kay, Rachel Freed, CBI.
Toby Berkman, CBI.
Bill Cabeza,
Kristen Aro,
Malcolm Bryant,
Liz Martin.
Sven Vivo.
Jeff Collins, David Owen.
and Clifford. Okay. Thank you. So our main goals for tonight's meeting are to identify key issues for research and consultation from the 2023 Alternative Analysis Report. And also kind of get aligned on what our next steps are going to be moving forward and for future meetings. You can see the agenda that we have up on the slide. At 7 o'clock, we will open up the meeting to public comment as noted on the agenda. This meeting is being recorded and a video link will be posted to the task force website in a few days. And we're still working with the bridge to get our article published. We expect it to happen soon, although I think we are past the deadline for this week, but we expect to get it done soon. It's written, it's just a question of acceptance. So
Yeah, I would say a word about
Yeah,
that.
please.
The problem is that it's too long to be a letter and they haven't approved it yet to be an article. So we have to work that through with them. And Chris has been great about reaching out to them, but we haven't heard back from the main editor. We had a short correspondence, but we haven't heard anything further. So we're still waiting to hear back.
So we'll figure that out and so it should be in, hopefully, it won't, I don't expect it to be in this Friday, but hopefully it'll be in the following Friday. Okay, and as far as the May 9th, 2024 minutes, we weren't able to get those on time. I mean, it was a short turnaround time between the last meeting and this meeting. And so, so we will approve them at the next meeting. Okay, Toby.
Great, all right, thanks, Chris. So just wanna briefly note where we are in our process here. So at the beginning, we clarified a bunch of norms, shared our goals and interests, and started identifying criteria. We are now moving towards the end of our second phase, where we're working to develop a shared understanding of the issues, the facts, issues that need to be resolved, the options that we wanna evaluate. And we're going to start working to identify some unanswered questions through research and consultation, and that's really going to be moving us into stage 3, which is going to be work groups. It's going to be a major part of that. So we're going to talk later in this meeting about some ideas for work groups and how we're going to advance those. But we think that's likely to start at the next meeting. We'll actually start dividing you all into groups and working on some of the questions and issues that we've identified that need to be resolved. Once we've done some of that work and shared the outcome and gotten clarity as much as we can on those issues, that's when we're going to move to the last stage to really work on deciding and coming up with what we think our package of recommendations is likely to look like. So you can see where we are. We're sort of approaching the midway point, I would say, in terms of where we've been and where we're going to be going. Okay, so Chris mentioned the May 9th meetings. We'll be working on those in our next meeting, improving them. For today, the first major topic on the agenda is discussing the 2023 Alternatives Analysis Report. Okay, so I'm gonna hand out here to folks again, mostly illegible printout of a spreadsheet, but we're doing this because we haven't sent these to you. I actually just sent an email. We didn't want to send them before the meeting because that constitutes a form of non-public deliberation. So we're sharing them with you now, and I'm going to share a summary on the slides, just like we did last time. And then you will have access to a legible spreadsheet that is just sent around and will also be made online. But if you want to hand, there's an extra copy with our member of the public can have one as well. And again, we'll share a summary. So just to recap, right, the main pre-work we wanted you to do is read that 2023 report, and we asked you a number of, and I key questions, and you all submitted responses. The first one was, what simply are your high-level takeaways from the report? I'm gonna share the responses on that in a second. What conclusions does the report make that you think are especially relevant to our analysis moving forward? Are there questions raised by the report that we should address in order to fill knowledge or data gaps? If so, which ones? What information about the alternatives does the task force need in order to evaluate them effectively? And then finally, we asked a bit about your thoughts on bringing in experts to help us with some of these ideas or issues. So we're going to start with the high-level takeaways that a number of you drew from the report. I'm going to do my best just to summarize what came in for each of these, and I think we'll pause after each of these questions and give folks a chance to just get some clarity on where the comments were coming from, have a little discussion about where the group is. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
All right, so
Yeah.
would you mind, could you minimize the?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
Yeah, into that.
Yeah.
I'm never sure like what you can see and what you can see, so. All right, so just in terms of high level takeaways, and I'll just say, not surprisingly, people had very different takeaways on this report. We know that this report has been, a source of disagreement and controversy in the town, and we saw that reflected in these responses, to some extent, right? I mean, it's not universal. But generally, takeaways regarding to the methodology, at least one person, and that's the case for all of these bullets, named that there were just a limited number of alternatives considered, so it wasn't like a full alternatives analysis, and really driving the decision of which alternatives to evaluate were cost constraints. And we'll come back to that because that was a real theme throughout a number of these comments. Another commenter on the methodology noted that there was collaboration around town divisions to develop the goals. And we heard from some others, some questions around those goals. Why weren't they the envisioned conference goals, for example? So I'll share a little more about those comments in a minute. We also heard a number of people kind of key takeaways just being, we don't really trust this analysis. It seems like it came to an early conclusion, and the analysis was sort of driven to support that conclusion. Some folks commenting on misleading, inaccurate, or contradictory statements. Some of the takeaways related to dam removal, right? So people naming a takeaway for them is we just need more clarity on the approach, the phases, the costs and feasibility. So people wanting more information about what are the possible dredging approaches that we could use here beyond just the one that was considered. Excuse me, I'm talking about dam removal here. So sorry, more clarity on what dam removal will look like, what the phases of it will look like, the costs and the feasibility. So people feeling like they really don't yet understand how dam removal will happen, right, and what it looks like. So wanting more information on that. Other people commenting that generally they thought this alternative was well thought out and presented, and there were some clear benefits that for them felt really resonant. Ecological restoration, fish migration, and aquatic organism passage, sediments being flowing downstream, the reduction or elimination of aquatic invasives, the possibility of a connected paddling trail, the lack of an economic burden, and the permanent safety from issues with dam that might come up around dam failure, the potential for funding to pay for a meaningful portion or more of this option, wood turtle as an invasive species, endangered species, rare species, right, having their habitat expanded, and just that this is a permanent solution to the issues with the pond that will take care of it once and for all. A number of people naming, well, this seems like an appealing vision, but I'm actually having a hard time envisioning what the transition would look like and understanding how we get from here to what this alternative says we're going to get to eventually. What does that look like? What are the steps? How likely is that? Are there bumps that could come up along the way? With respect to dredging, right? A lot of comments just on the specificity of this design, that it's a limited dredge area that involves sediment relocation, and it's a very sort of narrow concept that was evaluated, and as a result has potentially some fairly narrow benefits, right? So a negligible reduction of sediment associated nutrients and recreational benefits due to the small dredge area. People noting that there was a lack of analysis of a larger volume dredge, different disposal options, and lots of questions on the cost assumptions that were driving the choice of this particular alternative. Some comments also noting that the analysis of this option seemed to undervalue the importance of the pond to West Concord, and the people in the region, in the area feeling strongly about its character.
I'm sorry, just
Mhm.
clarifying question on that last item. The dredging option undervalued the.
That could go under dam removal, excuse
Oh,
me.
it's a dam
Yeah,
removal.
dam removal, yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
that's a more logical.
My mistake, yeah.
Got it.
I did this today. So, as these came in, so apologies for errors like that. In other high level takeaways, so people noting the criteria that were used for decision making, and some people comparing the project objectives that were articulated in this document versus Envision Concord criteria. So some people, and I'll share a little more about these comments in a minute, noting, well, why was it different? These are different, they're not the same. And some people actually commenting the opposite, like, hey, we've gone through an analysis of looking at Envision Concord, and it looks pretty similar to what we're seeing in this document, even though they came from different places. A number of comments also that a lot of these criteria are really subjective, right? Like, how do you evaluate the character of West Concord and the impact on that, right? And other issues, right? It's hard costs and benefits of the visuals and aesthetics, right? That these are hard to evaluate and really depending on the individual. People had comments on public input, noting that some felt like this was just insufficient outreach. Another noting that there was a survey and it indicated more than half of people supporting dam removal. Some comments on the pond conditions.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Depends how you interpret that survey. I don't actually agree with that. It's
Okay,
actually more like 30% supported dam removal.
great. Okay, so even on that, there's a difference in interpretation, right? So thanks for that, Keith.
What differences in?
Yeah, do you want to explain, Keith?
We can look at how it's broken down. The people who are strongly for dam removals. I forget what the number is, that of 251 get you to 28-30%. Then the next category was they're on the fence.
No, there was support, strong support, those two numbers, those numbers combine those two
Well,
categories.
we're gonna pull it up. I don't think it's, there's something, it might say strongly supports, but then it says but. So we'll have to look at
There
that.
were 5 categories in the middle, these include the top 2, but capital.
Okay, so we can, this is something that is pretty easily resolved, right? It seems like if we look at the details of the survey, but something that we want to do, clearly. In terms, there were also comments on the condition of the pond. People just noting a takeaway for me is like, this needs to be clean, right? People citing the Mass Wildlife Fish Survey and what it shows about the condition of the pond, the fact that it's listed as impaired by Massachusetts DEP. And also comments on the dam condition, right? A comment that it's class 2, which means it's significant, identified as having a significant hazard potential. I'll also note, this was a comment on a later question, but a difference of opinion on, what the data shows about the state of the dam and its condition. So that's not universal.
So we just to pin one thing up on criteria and subjectivity of some of the things we're trying to weigh,
Yeah.
especially aesthetics. I thought it was interesting that there was a note of Army Corps' like visual aesthetic evaluation. tool.
Right,
Maybe not,
yeah.
that's not the right one, but that's something that will be subjective, or it's hard to not make subjective, but maybe there's a tool out there, National Park Service or
Right.
who knows what. A visual aesthetic assessment
Mhm.
tool that we might investigate.
Right. So is there a tool out there that even people who think differently about this issue in this task force could all agree, like, hey, this actually could work for us,
Yeah.
right?
And then
Yeah,
on the last bullet there, significant hazard potential, I commented on that. That is, my understanding is that's an assessment of the risk should the dam fail.
Got it.
But it's not dam condition. So
okay,
hopefully the condition is fine because it.
right,
But it's present
Yeah.
that.
I can
great, yeah,
But
Keith, go
to
ahead.
add on to those, that assessment, so that every 3 or 5 years, they do a safety inspection with the dam safety office, and I have seen the last 2 reports, and both of those recommend that the dam be downgraded to a class 1 for safety, because the downstream effects to loss of life and human safety is pretty low.
Uh-huh.
So just something to throw out there that, so the designation hasn't occurred, but the people surveying and assessing the dam recommend that it be declassified, or sorry, classified,
Mhm.
degraded downgraded to a class 1, the lowest. Safety
Okay.
risk.
Great, so
And we
this
can look
is,
at that, I mean, their
yeah,
town has those reports.
uh-huh. So this is something that, again, we can, add as a issue to potentially get clarity on, is what are the risks if the dam were to fail, right? How extensive are they? Right, this gets us go to the climate resilience issue that we've been batting around. So let me just check in, I mean, any other questions, or comments on what you're seeing here? Anything here seems surprising? Yeah, Paul.
The very first bullet on the methodology for me was a high level takeaway. That the report, I know sort of the origin of the report, but it really wasn't an alternatives analysis report. It was analysis of several specified alternatives. So, yeah, the reader should look at that as all the alternatives. I mean, that's obvious. We know
Yeah.
that, but I mean, my high level it was a very limited study. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah,
I mean, one amount of dredging, less, it was cost driven because the original. And I think Keith's analysis of the RFP from the last meeting was a revelation to me,
yeah,
that there are alternatives at different amounts of dredging. Are a perfectly suitable set of alternatives to look at,
yeah,
not just one.
right. So I mean, I think I'll just say, and you'll see this when you look through the spreadsheet. So this was a really common refrain, I think among people who think differently about these issues, right? Kind of on all sides, which is, there's a huge range here on the costs. $20 that we heard at the last meeting per cubic acre, $60. What, cubic yard.
It's like,
That'd be really, yeah. For cubic yard, think 20 versus 60 basically, and getting some actual clarity on that, right, is gonna be so key to us being able to evaluate dredging, and what's possible.
It's very clear that finances are on everybody's minds.
Yeah.
And we agree, it's a
Mhm.
major element of any kind of analysis that you do.
Also, they didn't have the EA didn't have the opportunity to look at that potential site, I think that Keith, you and Delia mentioned next to Route 2, as a place to put the dredges. I'd be very curious in the future, I don't want to I'm probably jumping out of the screen here, but as to whether that they would accept all the silt there. That would be important, and it's.
Right. Yeah.
Didn't we, when Keith, did you talk about the in pond placement being the least expensive because we're not relocating? That's essentially what they're proposing. So there's a lot of alignment on cost and maximizing dredging if you can place it in pond. So
Yeah,
it had been a while since I read the whole thing. I was like, oh, so can you talk about that? So.
Was there anything that you read that you like, oh, this causes me to think about this differently, like I hadn't, like someone who said, I don't know who was talking, but that, oh, I didn't realize that, this, having read this. The 2023.
So one thing that jumped out at me was the requirement makes sense to feather in, to have a maximum slope of the pond bottom. In my mind, I was over, this isn't realistic, but saying, okay, you dredge out, and you've got a 10-foot deep area, but you can't have a straight path of water. And so I would like to see, like, well, what does this mean? This is still a lot of shallow ponds before we get down to the depth where the vegetation won't. The vegetation won't persist. So I think it'd be informative to have an assessment of, and I also thought that the graphics appendix B, it didn't have a scale, so I couldn't really tell what their slope was, but it seemed steeper than they had recommended in the report. So it'd be interesting to see in any dredging scenario, how much of this newly dredged area is below this floating zone that is still going to have issues of rooted vegetation.
Yeah.
Anyone else with something that you read or you considered in the report that made you think differently?
Yeah. Based on what I've read about dredging, I always thought that the dredging, even the 32,000 cubic yards, not to mention 14,000 cubic yards, was a bit of a Band-Aid, given the size of the pond, you would have really solved the issues. I'm trying to get my head around that, but I don't think we have all the information to know if you remove that amount of sediment, not nutrients. Would that benefit the pond? But also open up, well, maybe a larger dredge. Under certain circumstances could be affordable. At some point, I think at some point there, I thought there is a dredging solution, which probably is optimal.
But there is,
It's
yeah,
probably optimal, that balances what we can afford versus what is actually effective. Because a minimum amount of dredging is not gonna be effective. Too much dredging we can't afford. Is there a point where those two meet? So that dredging solves a lot of problems.
Right.
So that kind of got me thinking.
But I feel that we can continue discussing this forever
Yeah.
until we actually know how much it's gonna cost to dredge. I mean, he gave a very clear presentation that it would be $20 to $25 per cubic yard. But EA quotes 60, and the quote we had, to the RFP was in that area. So there's a huge discrepancy in views as to what the cost will be.
Yeah.
The charter bid was for $25 a cubic yard.
Right, I'm not arguing with you, I'm
I'm
just
just
saying that, you know, in EA's report, they say they consulted with local contractors and this is the cost they were quoting. So we need to get clarity on that instead of working on numbers that we're really pulling from mid-air.
But EA would have called companies like Charter to get that number, so.
Right, but as a task force, we need definitive numbers to be able to make a judgment. And that means we need someone to stand in the middle of this room and tell us how much it will cost to do this. I mean, I think it's a waste of time to keep making up these numbers.
But that, in order for that person to stand up in front of the room, that person has to be told where is the disposal. That is a big part of the cost. The
Sure.
dredging itself, the physical dredging. I think that can be
I
estimated.
don't disagree,
So, how is that decision?
but we need to be very clear what it is we want, and we need to know how much it's gonna cost. Because, I mean, there's a threefold difference in costs that we're being.
I completely agree. It's just, at
Um,
some point, you gotta specify somebody to estimate.
yeah, I mean, we can blue sky it as much as we like, but at some point we've got to come down to it.
You know, I think you're right, Paul. I mean, you have to look at it like maybe, you know, three different alternatives as far as the dredging is concerned. You know, I think I don't know if we all agree, but I think that 14,000 cubic yards is not worth it.
It's not what.
I think it needs to be more. And so, you know, so if you look at more, well, how much more? And then like maybe looking at 100,000 and looking at maybe, I don't know, 40 or something like that, or 50. Talking about, okay, in both of these scenarios, where does the dredge go? Is it somewhere where it stays inside the pond, or is it dredge that's moved somewhere else? I mean, I think there's a lot of variables that have to be considered, so we have to look at these variables in different ways, you know, so that you're comparing apples to apples.
I think you could probably get a unit cost for dredging and then disposal within the ponds and at an offsite location. So you could probably get those, I think you'd have to pay for it to get, you know, a contractor to submit not a full bid, but just that unit cost. So at least you're understanding, you know, what that current number is today.
So, okay, go ahead. I was just gonna suggest that I think, you know, these questions to me are clearly something that we're gonna have a work group. Probably work pretty closely with, you know, with the town, think about how we can get answers to these questions. And clearly, there's a piece around project design, right, and how to maximize the efficiency of that, while also maximizing the ecological benefits. And there are also some ecology questions that we've heard raised in a number of meetings, the interaction between sediment and water quality. And how much, 14,000 cubic yards isn't gonna do it, like, what is the amount at which we're actually likely to see broader water quality benefits, right, that are meaningful. Right, and can we, how much of that can we figure out, right? Which is a scientific question, it's an expert question.
Yeah, and to add to the complexity, the
Mhm.
disposal options bear on that.
Exactly, in pond or out.
Because
Yeah.
you remove nutrients from the bottom of the pond, you put them on the side of the pond, they still can make their way to.
Exactly.
So that's a study that.
Yeah, yes. So that, I think those are probably the two big areas that the dredge work through, or maybe two, right, are gonna have to try to answer for us and help us figure it out. At least that's what we've been hearing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
to, I know you wanna move, but at some point, or probably soon, it's a good idea to come up with a straw man timeline for how long that would take to do, because given the schedule that we're on, we wouldn't wanna wait too long to start that if we all understand that piece of work has to be done. It's probably better to spin it up sooner rather than later.
That's.
Yeah.
How long, I'm curious whether maybe Delia you know how long would it take if we formed a work group? How long would it take for them to get that kind of report back from some concept?
I don't think it would take long, I mean, under a couple weeks.
Couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to move on that, I think, very quickly. You know?
Sven had his hand up, yeah.
Yeah, when I read the study again, I left it with the feeling that we need to understand more on the dam removal. We spend a lot of time on dredging, different scenarios, different kind of things, but actually we haven't spent really a minute on that scenario. So I think we should find some way to kind of, in a similar process like we learned about dredging, to educate ourselves, what does dam removal mean? Because in the end, we have to put scenarios and options on one side. I feel now more educated about dredging, no question. There's a lot of additional information, but I'm still on the same knowledge about dam removal. So that would be something I think we should find a way that we all learn more about that scenario.
And I'll just add, and we're kind of skipping around what's in the survey, but that's fine. When we were looking at sort of what people were interested in getting someone to come educate us, understanding dam removal, the options, the approaches, the impacts, right, that was a big one. So I think we'll talk about this, but it's one of our suggestions for next meeting. If we can get someone.
You have somebody into the on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, in addition to others, but yeah.
Yeah. I'd also like to hear from some, I mentioned this before, someone who, I don't know, a place where this has been done and what the repercussions have been to the restoration. Has it turned out the way they expected it to after a dam was removed? I'd love to hear from someone on that.
I was curious, going back to Chris's comment. Is there a sense among its members that 14,000 cubic yard dredge is not a viable option?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Just because in terms of going forward, giving groups a task list, taking things off the list can be helpful.
I still think is when we have that, there should be at least some documentation. What's the rationale to say it's not? Now that we all can at a certain point can go back and say, that's why that cut off. It's just, at the moment, we all feel like that, but perhaps putting 2 or 3 sentences behind. That is more than just putting to the side, because right now, this study shows that there are equal costs between the two scenarios.
I think the alternatives analysis report was pretty clear that there would be limited benefits. It was very transparent. Some cases, there was no benefit on nutrients, but deepening here, the 3 acres and more wildlife, there were limited benefits. I'm not sure the limited benefits are the goal, but I mean,
Yeah.
the report was pretty clear on what benefits were and weren't.
And Malcolm, Sven, is talking about, so how would the task force, right, so y'all feel that the 14,000 isn't viable, it's not gonna get to the goals that you want, can anyone say for yourself why? Why, you know? Not a test, but if you could, then let's start.
I think the best thing would be to, frankly, in this case, quote the EA report, which doesn't believe it's viable. Is that correct?
I think
The,
what I keep on hearing about that is that it seems to be very unclear what the nutrient and sediment loading benefits of a 14,000 square cubic yard project would actually be. And they seem to be unquantified and therefore suspected to be very minimal and therefore not worth pursuing. That's what's coming through to me.
Am I wrong too? Also, I may be wrong in this. Also, wasn't their dredging notion that they would just build shelves? They weren't taking any of the sediment off out of the pond.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that's almost as bad as the 14,000 square feet, because
Yeah.
you're just adding, you're just suggesting that, Mark. It's just gonna leach back into the pond again.
Moving around the chairs on the deck of.
Yeah.
Feels like a very excessive price.
Yeah,
As far as I know, there's never been an analysis of just what the connection of the nutrients and sediments are to the water quality. The work that was done earlier, so it did the mass balance of what was coming into the pond from upstream and had pretty, thousands of kilograms and what the mass in the water quality of the pond was. But no, I've never seen a conclusion of you remove X amount of sediments, what the impact on the water quality would be. And currently,
A little bit of that in the 2018 dredging report, so that report did evaluate total phosphorus, but that was the only nutrients that I recall seeing in there, and it was in support of if you dredge, that there would be some value. But
if
recognize,
you remove amount of phosphorus, what the change in water quality would be.
I don't think it didn't really, it
No.
just said you were going to remove that.
No, I agree with that. Would there be an improvement in water quality? That's the lane that,
Yeah, it seems.
Right.
it's not hard to do,
Yeah.
Right,
Um,
right.
but nobody's done.
My recollection is it seemed to be more focused on how much plant growth there was gonna be as a result of the removal of the nutrient rather than, and I'm assuming that vegetation is different from water quality, really.
The plant growth seems to be sort of, that's the code, like that's
Yeah.
the identifier of being
Water
used
quality.
for water quality. And
Yeah, maybe slightly out of turn. So the 800-pound gorilla roaming around here, sort of the character of the pond, right? Because if character of the pond, keeping it as a pond is the highest goal, then you don't remove the dam, right? But if other goals are more important, changing the system, then dam removal is viable. And for me, at some point we have to come to grips with that goal. How big is that goal versus? Because character is one of the criteria, but we have ecological, we have recreation, we have fiscal. I mean.
But that comes to the point, we need to understand the dam removal part better, and how would it look like after? And is it really, what kind of character do you generate in the natural landscape? Then we have, as I said, we haven't spent a minute on this to say, this one criteria is then the only one that overrides everything. You have to see what are the alternatives to the current character.
But the graphics in this report were conceptually answer that question, now whether it's, if we remove the dam, this is what it's gonna look like. You have a mini pond
Yeah,
and a creek, and maybe we accept that as the reality, and then we evaluate that reality. Is that?
Well, the thing that concerned me about that is that when you're reading through the dam removal and they're talking about all the different criteria, they're like, oh, well, that will be considered at a later phase. And then you go to the next one, oh, that will be considered at a later phase. So is that later phase additional money over and above what is already, what would be targeted to dam removal? I mean, so that was a concern that I had. It just felt like it just felt like to me in reading it, it was like, okay, the dam's gonna be taken down and we'll just let it flow as it may, maybe do a few things, and then.
Yeah.
You know, if we're gonna do other things, well, you know, we'll take a look at that later. And it just felt a little.
Yeah.
Unfinished.
I might be able to just provide a little clarity on that, just in terms of. With the alternatives analysis, it was very conceptual, the dam removal, because the goal of this report wasn't to put money into. The design and engineering that would answer some of the questions that were, you know, identified as to be. Figured out at a later date. But then as we were moving forward with this last year, before NRC decided to form a task force, we did put out a bid for a 30% preliminary dam removal design, in part to answer some of these questions. So some of those are currently being evaluated now. I don't think all of them, because but that's sort of how the process would work.
So it's hard to make a decision, I'm sorry, no, so it's hard to make a decision then based on. Potential or what ifs.
Right,
versus-
I think that's true, but I also think that the work that is under contract right now was designed to provide that information, because remember, it was with the intent of bringing it to town meeting this year. So we wanted to have all that information and not have a lot of what ifs.
So Julie, will that information be coming online on time for us to start looking at it relatively soon to inform our conversations?
So the work is underway right now. The modeling is somewhat complete. So I think I'm actually waiting for a timeline.
Okay.
I hope to have something later this week on that. And that's something that I can share out with the task force once we have that information.
Yeah.
For us to get again.
Right,
Jeff, you've been waiting. I don't want to just make a point
Wait,
here.
no, no.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just back to Paul's point about if, you know, setting those objectives, or it'll be way. And put it as, are we keeping the pond or not, whatever. I hope we can get to a point where we talk a little bit about this, but you know, what are the elements, what are the activities, components we're looking to retain or maximize? And then, you know, we're dredging and filling, that's reducing the surface area of the pond. But if we're in the conceptual plan of the dam removal, we still have a 5-acre pond, so in a deep portion of it. You know, within the deeper section of the current one. So both of those would retain some scale, so rather than paint a final picture pond or no pond, because there's different permutations under any scenario, what are those activities and benefits that we're looking to retain and maximize, and then compare under various scenarios?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm glad you came back on that, and I want to follow up. I just want to name, you know, we're thinking about kind of issues for the workers to address. I think on dam removal, I mean, we'll see how much more clarity we get when we hear, you know, from an expert, and they walk us through sort of how this can happen and ways projects can look. Maybe we'll, you know, get some of that information from the town. But it seems like where we're at now, the work group on dam removal is gonna try to help flesh out for us the possibilities, right? And help us understand how it happens, what, you know, what it looks like over time, right? What needs to happen to make it look that way, et cetera, right? So that's, I think, one of the tasks of that group. I do think this question around the character of the pond as a pond, and Jeff, you know, hearing your point about we can kind of disaggregate the qualities that a pond provides and sort of not have it be a black or white thing, right? I think that would be a part of this. But I am curious, I mean, you were looking at your watch, should probably move on to some other questions. But I'd say a big unanswered question for us, right, is, and I'm not sure, and I think we would love to your idea, but how do we actually evaluate that? Like, how important is it if that ends up being a really important deciding factor for us in deciding among options? The pond is a pond, and qualities of that it brings. How do we evaluate the importance of that to Concord, to West Concord in some kind of objective way, right? Beyond just, I feel this.
Right, it goes to the whole landscape and
Yeah.
history and culture and
Yeah.
all those questions from the
Yeah, but
didn't you just go through the exercise to say, these are the criteria according to the whatever
Yeah.
plan? And this is one of the first questions where in the end, we will find ways to assign points and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then we compare the different scenarios. We don't need to rediscuss the criteria again. We just defined a couple of meetings ago.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the question is there some way for you all to put your score on that criteria
see that.
beyond just,
We will see the next one.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
that's true.
the-
yeah, yeah.
I think the way that I look at it in terms of process is that the groups themselves have to wrestle with this, and parse it. And then that will help the group educate the larger group about how you thought about a particular issue, and then that may feed into the way that you're able to score.
Yeah, I thought, that we weren't making, predetermined judgments about what the footprint of current Warner's Pond would be. That, and everything is on the table. That's the job of the task force. And yet almost everything we've discussed so far has been, how do we preserve the pond? So we are way off base. I think Sven has already said this. We're way off base with our charge right now. And I think it's really important for us to stop thinking of a pond and really think about the land area that the town owns, most of which is currently covered with water. And what is the future of that land area? Is it that it will continue to be a pond? Is it that it will be a smaller pond with more, marsh? Or will it be that there will be no real pond, but there'll be a river run? And I really think we should be discussing that in some way.
I agree completely with the latter part of what you said. The earlier part, you said somehow we predetermined we want to maintain the pond. I'm.
No, sorry, did I say that?
I thought you
I
said.
didn't mean to imply that we have
No, it's
predetermined.
something we're discussing. For me, how do you start with that? Some of the visual renderings, accurate or not, in this report in Appendix B, I start with what, there's some planar diagrams and there's some conceptual diagram, what it would look like as a smaller pond versus then a creek versus a larger pond. I'd start with that, and then, how accurate is that? I'd want to dig into that. I'd want to dig into that, but how can we assure ourselves it's really gonna look like this? Because the aesthetics and the character are more visual. And the impacts both on, the whole pond and then on the butters, it can be visualized, and that's, I think the character is pretty visual, and plus you add access to Scout Island in that, and that's, that defines sort of the character. A lot that's visual to me to start. And, this, look at some interesting graphic renderings.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that, but I think I would have a little word of caution just around digging into that too much, and this is sort of following on what Keith mentioned at the last meeting or a few meetings, that modeling is tricky, and it really is, it's meant to be predictive, it's not meant to show you what it will look like at the, it's a tool to give some guidance, but I don't think you will ever know how exactly any system is going to respond, because the model cannot incorporate every single, micro topography, every little parameter that, each system is gonna have in some area.
It does. I was gonna say, following on that, is that part of the struggle of the group is to deal with the uncertainty, because you just aren't gonna completely know what any choice is going to look like at the end. It's
Yes,
the nature of these
I
kinds
mean,
of projects.
all models are wrong, but some are very
Some
useful.
are.
And that's.
I was
That's the case here, and,
Yes.
we have a starting point, we have to validate somehow what we're looking at. Maybe it's a different model, maybe it's a consultant, maybe it's verification. But at the end, we're gonna be relying on modeling here, because we're modeling the future, we can't
Yeah.
measure the future.
So I'll continue with that. So modeling will show you some entry level information in this case, but when you take the dam down, there's gonna be dozers out there forming a stream channel. So we will make the stream look like the way we want it.
Yeah.
That's essentially.
Maybe not, that is not necessarily what would happen under a dam removal scenario.
Well, there'll definitely be some element of that for sure. I mean, when you look at the bathymetry, there is no clear stream channel type. So it's gonna need some help getting started, and there's gonna be a cost to that too, just trying to be aware.
Right, so I think this comes back, I think you flagged Chris around, a number of people flagged honestly about what does dam removal look like? Right, how does it happen? Right, all those moving pieces, yeah.
I think, going back to the actual purpose of the task force in the first place. I think it was born out of the recognition that there is a very complicated sets of information acquired at different points in time for, sometimes different purposes. And it is a big conceptual decision. I think the ultimate decision maker around this is the community as a whole. And I tend to think about our responsibility here is to sort through these details and try and bring them to some kind of coherent level where we can identify with a reasonable level of precision what the broad choices are that we're going to make as a community about this resource in this resource area. And then, so we do need to really engage with what would a dam removal project actually look like? What is its impact over a decade, over 20 years? What does it cost to maintain that? How does that occur? Just like we have to reckon with what would happen if we literally did nothing and just inspected the dam every few years and anything in between, and recognize that we're, I think what our job here is to point out some alternatives and then present those as, really get into the community education side of things, the engagement side to bring the broader community online and say, what sorts of investments does this community want to make in this resource, which is, doing something over time. And if we create that environment that some kind of consensus can be built across the community, that may involve a short-term, long-term, and very long-term approach to what's going to happen here, that's where that's our job is to kick that off. And Concord as a community is pretty good at doing things like putting together long-range plans and then checking itself every 5 or 10 years about the status of those plans. That's how some of these things like Envision Concord come to us as part of a long series of that. And that's what we're doing. We have the benefit of being able to take a long-term approach here.
Yeah, well said, right? I think it points to the idea of our recommendations not necessarily being just one thing, right? It could be about a series of steps to take over time.
Yeah.
Right, with decision points along the way.
And sort of the basis for what those future decisions are going to be about.
Yeah.
Staff.
Yeah, I think this. You have a study here, compares 3 scenarios. But one of the tasks of the task force or objectives was also to look at other alternatives we should look at. And I still remember this presentation from this gentleman, which more that sort of communication out of the keeping a pond and having a stream. Where the stream goes sideways, we have.
Yeah.
So I'm just scratching my head, okay, I mean, now, are we missing out, are we missing a scenario or two? Which we have to add on the agenda, just again to what Mark said is that we can represent to the concordance, we looked at the different scenarios, and
Mhm.
this is what we uncovered. That we are not just letting something, we are just focused on the history. It's a little bit like, I don't know, remodel project in your house, you start with the big ideas, and then you just meander around. And suddenly just change the front door. Yeah, it's a little bit like this. So, but I just think we should say is, okay. Besides the three,
What else?
what else?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's very good.
Which also hangs back, it takes you back around to like the discussion about, well, what are the goals, what?
Yeah.
The pond, what is the meaning of the pond, or what Malcolm is talking about?
Concretely, do we know who that person was who spoke about the burn? Do we know?
Yeah.
Oh, we did, John, okay.
All right, let's, just so you guys can see sort of the broader range of ideas that came up, although I think we've touched on a lot of these. I'll continue through this, but I think we're really having a good conversation and clarifying some important issues, for us moving forward. So, the next question here was, what if any conclusions does the report make that you think are especially relevant to our analysis moving forward, whether or not you agree? So a number of people here commented on just the overall analysis of alternatives. Some people naming the table 410, which is sort of where it lays out to what extent did each of these alternatives achieve these different goals. And that's where dam removal comes out on top. So people say we should look at that closely, like see whether we agree or not, right? Whether we think that those are accurate analyses. So that's one comment that came up from a number of folks. I mentioned, a difference of opinion on these goals. Some comments saying this isn't Envision Concord, why not? Don't trust it. Others saying actually they seem to align well with our criteria. A comment saying all of these options seem costly and time consuming. I don't like any of them, so I want us to keep looking for new ones, right? Which I think Sven is aligned with sort of your call to the group to make sure we're not leaving any stone unturned here, right? In addition to, I think, the broader call for looking at, also other options of dredging, understanding possibilities of what different dam removal projects could look like. Some other comments noting, for someone, right, the fact that this is inevitably going to transition to a vegetated wetland, if the dam stays in place, that's just a natural progression. That is not a question of if, but when. It was something that resonated for that person. And as noted, just the idea that alternative designs beyond these three were not studied or evaluated. We heard comments on dredging feeling like a Band-Aid, at least this approach, right, to dredging, being a Band-Aid, echoing comments today. Dam removal comment that it seems very good from an ecological and recreational perspective, but will change the character of the area. And how do we evaluate that if that's the conclusion we come to as a group? There were some concerns raised about this report. People noting that there are contradictions and assumptions that seem questionable, right? A comment that the report notes that the pond was created in 1857, but Thoreau was writing about it earlier. These assumptions around dredging costs, people questioned. Someone noting that it talks about there being a reduction in navigable waters if we remove the dam, but it's still talking about increased recreation, right? How does that circle square? And then a number of comments just noting the limited community feedback, feeling like there was a lack of public input or involvement, lack of clarity on what stakeholder feedback should be considered and how. Specific call out that the analysis was not informed by the Scouts' use of the islands currently or historically. And that there was a pledge in the document to include abutters in preliminary dam removal planning and data analysis, but that has not happened. So I think these echo some of the things we've heard already, but does anyone have any other things to see or questions? Yes, Sven.
I would add funding sources,
Mm-hmm.
important factors. Right now, we're saying it costs, let's say, it will cost equally
Mm-hmm.
the different scenarios. But if it's funded, let's say, completely out of property tax dollars
Mm-hmm.
versus, let's say, 90% Massachusetts or other sources are granting it, there's a there's an element to think about that too.
Yes, yes. So that's a comment that came on both as a kind of resonant conclusion, but also a question, like, what can we really know? Like, is there more, we can get a ballpark figure around if we did dam removal, really how likely is it that we get this money? How much money would it potentially be? The report is very ambiguous about that.
I have just a quick question, Delia, or maybe Mark. We have put aside, was $3 million for this before, is that what we have said?
So, well, it's less now because the work that is being done for the preliminary dam removal analysis is coming out of that much money.
Okay,
Contract with CBI is also, so there's probably closer to 2.5 right now.
2.5 million,
Or
and
a little more than that.
we don't, that stays with us, you know, in other words, we don't worry about that being taken back by who the Community Preservation Committee or anything, or is that?
So CPA has projects are, they have a 30-month life,
Okay,
but that can be extended.
okay, so it's fairly secure for us then,
Yeah, Anne is a CPC
oh, and,
representative, and I don't know if you have anything clarifying to add.
Right, and Paul is on GBC.
Okay.
Sorry.
Too. So yes, this comes up periodically, and right, so we build into the grant agreements and MOUs that there's a 30-month time frame, but extensions are very possible when people.
okay,
We have discussed this issue and it's status quo right now until a decision's made on what to do. If it remains a dredging project, then move ahead. If it's a different project, then we'll have to revise the application.
Okay.
We haven't really specified the future, but right now status quo.
good, okay.
Can I just ask the confirmation that the money is essentially committed? So spending the remaining amount or whatever isn't going to increase real estate taxes. It's already being.
It's already been
It's
out.
already.
Yeah,
right.
Right. So what we do at town meeting is the CBA funds are from a surcharge on real estate transactions.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah.
And it comes, and then it's allocated by the Community Preservation Committee through the town meeting article that we see every year. And then, so it's essentially segmented off and sits there, and there are the 3 or 4 different purposes they can be used for. So yes, it's essentially money that's already been collected.
But the two parts of the funds here, one is CPA money, and then capital money from the town.
Right.
And I'm not, if
That is already.
that's committed,
That's committed to, okay.
then that,
How much is that?
Well, I can give you a budget breakdown, but I don't have enough.
No, I mean, just a ballpark. I mean, is what's coming from, I mean, is it all like on hold, so to speak, or?
Yeah, it's all on hold.
Yeah.
And I would say roughly it's 50-50,
yes.
maybe a little more capital than CPA.
So the application that it's made at the time that you go before the CPC in the first place specifies how much you're asking them to grant and how much you're planning on raising from other sources at that time. So when we say $2.5 million, that's inclusive of both of those sources.
Correct.
Okay,
So it's what the town already committed in the capital plan as well as, but at that point, at this point, that it hasn't really been actually committed to spend on anything, it's just allocated and sitting in a, all escrow.
And if we were to get grants for any component of this, that could defray the cost coming out of that pool and, return money to CPC or.
Right, it could be returned to CPC, it could not be spent for capital, it could be used towards recreation improvements.
All right, that's helpful clarity to get. Let me share the next bunch of questions here. And I think sort of what I'm gonna share here and, what we've been talking about, to me, these are almost like the list of questions that we're gonna, in some sense, be asking our work groups to look at among some others, right? Is a useful way to think about it. So, and they kind of mirror what's in the issues document, and we'll get to that in a minute. but if you look at, the questions we got, some of them were about pond characteristics. So this question that we've heard raised in these meetings a number of times is, what are the trends and rate of change in water quality over time? What is this water body if we do nothing, right, gonna look like in 5 years, 10 years, right? What can we say about that? And likewise, what do we know or not know about the sediment characteristics, which gets to this important question about the impact of dredging on water quality issues, right?
Can I just get
Yeah.
clarity on that? What does that mean, the sediment characteristics? Is that the grain size? Is that, what, nutrients are bound up in the sediments?
Yeah.
What does that mean
So
exactly?
I think I'll just say this is coming from, I think, two people. One is Paul, your comments about sort of understanding the availability of phosphorus, right?
It's the connectivity of the sediment nutrients with the water quality.
Mhm.
That's
And then-
really what-
Yeah, and then, so will removing it improve water quality, will placing it improve
Right.
water quality? And then, Chris, I think this is also a comment from yours, you can expand on what we,
Yeah, it was actually more of, is it good? Can it be used for other things? I mean, what is it about the sediment? Is it usable for anything else? Was really my concern. What do we know about it? Yeah, I'd like to understand that more, actually.
and the purpose would be to help us with dredging project design.
Right, I mean, does it make sense to leave it there? Could we
Yeah.
transport it to someplace that it could be used? Is it, what
Yeah.
makes the most sense to use? That sediment for, was my thought process.
Right.
The question actually, they play into dam removal too, because obviously if you remove the dam, now those sediments are. What, they're part of a wetland and you come up with the same questions of what do they actually lead to in terms of what that environment is gonna look like, so the sediments are gonna be part of the. No matter what happens.
Mhm.
And as part of the current contracts that is being looked at, so there's both the sediment characteristics as well as sediment transport modeling. To
Yeah.
help understand that a little bit better. Yeah, it happens with the sediments. With the dam.
Didn't you have a conversation, I may not, have, maybe you didn't, I don't know, with, the Department of Corrections about spreading it on their farm fields? They didn't, is that, not, maybe that never came up.
So that came up after, that came up during the bidding process. And, Jeff was the contact that we've been talking with throughout this process. And so it was whether there was an alternate location. And, I think it was Dave, your farmer, who identified an area that's west of the parking lot and south of Route 2.
We did, why not?
In your office, right, in your office.
Because of the chemical makeup of the soils and tested, you could put it where he currently farmed.
Oh.
That would get into the food chain,
Okay,
but he's not farming in front of the historic cemetery.
I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
In fact, Mass DOT has been watering well there, they were doing their initial designs for the Rotary project,
Huh,
so that's a potential location. We also looked at the sand filter beds from the wastewater treatment plant, which are now inactive.
oh,
I think we had like 3 to 6 beds. 3 to 6 that's a solar panels on them,
mhm.
but there's another 3 to 6 beds that are potential. But that was only like a third of what you were proposing to dredge.
So those were the ones at MCI Concord. No, I'm not familiar with the ones in Acton.
No, so that all is all concrete.
Yeah.
So the
Okay,
filter
so-
beds are by the wastewater treatment plant. The
Right.
floodplain is over here by
Yes.
the cemetery.
So would that plot, by the cemetery, would that hold? How, is there a limit about how much that could hold?
I need to calculate it.
Yeah,
Right, so it's a couple of acres. I mean, it's
pretty big.
The
20
key is that
feet,
you would no longer have to take it through.
right?
Um,
There is.
To the edge of the prison, yes, yeah,
So you're paying premium because of the security requirements. that
Yeah.
are required with any construction of correctional facility.
yeah. And there was that limit of what, couple trucks a day, wasn't that the real?
You'll put it down.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that really. Yes,
So,
we're back,
This
we're back,
is-
we're back to dredging.
Yeah, we had last time a short side discussion on PFAS, and I talked internally with Public Works manager on this, so perhaps it's good to update the group on this. So today, EPA standards are on drinking water. We know Niagara Pond, that feeds into the system, is double the EPA standard for the surface water. We can also assume that there will be more PFAS getting into the area because of the watershed structure. So we can assume that in the water, there's a higher PFAS level than at least for drinking water is allowed. It's unknown how much really goes into the sediment, but we know it goes into the sediment. So we have no idea how much is in there, but given the pyramid of PFAS levels, we can assume there is a certain level of PFAS in the sediment. That again leads to the, okay, if we take the sediment and not use it there where it's now, but use it somewhere else, we most likely have to understand what's the PFAS level. There's right now not a Massachusetts regulation, and if you dump it on a field, but if you look at what Maine is doing, and similar regulations might spill over to Massachusetts, that I would be very careful to use sediment which might have PFAS on a farm field. So that's something, if that goes to pass to say we use that material somewhere else, we have to understand the PFAS level, have to understand, is there a well somewhere, what does it mean, what could be potential future regulation for that area? And the last thing you want is something the farmers can't use their field anymore.
Yeah,
okay, so some of the questions that potentially a dredging group might need to look into around sediment characteristics when thinking about potential designs, and maybe also the, as you're noting, the dam removal as well. Just to continue through these points here, there was a comment around kind of wanting or suggesting that we need to answer some questions that look at think specifically kind of recreational issues with a more holistic lens. And Paul, this is coming from some of your comments, so you can feel free to elaborate here. But the idea is, we want to take a look at Hero Park, the Warner's water body, the Assabet River system, and think about, what are the desirable improvements, right? Capacities that system could provide us, right? And you think about that recreationally. I think the primary driver of the comment was probably recreation, but also ecologically, right? And how do we evaluate these alternatives based on that broader perspective? And I would also say, based on previous conversations, we could add to that broader perspective, accounting for some of the land use changes that are happening both in the immediate vicinity around MCI and housing growth, right, in the area. So I don't want to, I just want to give the floor to Paul for a second.
No, you explain. It's, the question, is that a desirable change? Is it changing the system to make it a connected system, which has benefits for fish migration, also has benefits for paddling? You put the kayak at Giroux and paddle all the way down to the Assabet River. But that comes a change in the character, so.
I have a question about fish migration. I'm curious, because the map, I was really caught on the map. I remember hearing that the dam, the Talbot Dam in Bill Ricker was going to come down, but I don't know where that stands. And I know I've heard mixed results about the dam removals along the Merrimack. That they haven't been all that efficient. So in other words, is it possible we would see fish migration if a dam came down? I'd love to know more about that, because I'm not sure about that.
So I think just for this conversation, like that was a question.
Yeah.
You had it, Phil, some other people had it, both the future of the Talbot Mill Dam, also just really understanding in this system, will the fish, what are the barriers to the fish? Will they come up here? What would be needed to, so Keith, you had a comment about how you might need to restock the water body potentially. It takes time, right? There'd be a whole process around that. So understanding more about fish migration and
Yeah.
practicalities is.
I'm
And it-
sure that information is available at the state level. There might be reports, because dam removal has been an ongoing
Mhm.
priority and for the purposes of fish migration. So
Yeah,
State Department of Fishery, the relevant department
Right.
probably has information on the benefits.
right. So this is a question that the dam removal work group might
Yeah,
be
yeah.
looking into.
There was
Yeah.
an article published not long ago that was looking at the fish migration. And their conclusion was that dam removal allows the fish, but the fish ladders are very inefficient. With the diatomeous fish that we have here on the East Coast.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I don't wanna cut this, this is an important conversation, but just wanna note, like, this is an important question that we need to get clarity on as a group, right?
I just want
Yeah.
to, just say that there's a lot to understand with diatomeous fish and.
Yeah.
Removing the downstream dams that have some fish patches that may not be that effective. But the fish that would come up. The Merrimack, the Cotton River, almost all of them will spawn in the main stem of these rivers.
Mhm.
Only alewife that actually look for little ponds. So there's actually something really. The Warner's Pond could actually be a really helpful thing for alewife, while all the other species, if they get past Talbot Dam. There's the 2016 feasibility report for, from the state that paid for, I think it was the state. Their conclusion was getting rid of the Talbot Dam alone would create a sustainable fishery for all the diatomeous fish trying to get. System, and so
Yeah.
Warner's Pond really is rather insignificant to help the diatomeous fish restoration plan of the state.
Uh-huh. So it sounds like it's not as simple a question, maybe as it might seem at face value, but.
And the pairing, whatever, will not just find Warner's Pond, they have to be born in it, swim out to sea, come back 5 years later, they use the smell of the waterway to find where they were born.
That would be good to get an expert on that.
Yeah,
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, with Talbot Mill, folks from NOAA, US Fish and Wildlife Service, they've kind of been supporting that process, so when you get to that, I'm deciding to bring people in and
right,
have
Right.
presentations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are folks who become very.
right. So experts on this issue, right, could be really helpful for us. Let me keep going through these, just for time. I think we've covered most of the main points here already. But just to name some of the questions people named, right, question around, how much, what impact will dredging have on recreation, given the disconnect with Hero Park? Will sediment quality improve, sediment removal improve water quality more broadly, right? What about in-pond sediment disposal? What is feasible in terms of the more extensive dredge? These questions around placement and sediment, a lot of people were asking. The question around polymer flocculant, I remember Googling this when I read the report. Is it safe? What does it do? Right, given that apparently is a part of this. What would be needed to establish a new wetland, under either alternative, right? Kind of seeding, what does that process look like? Or whether it's the South Richmond Cove, replacement of dredge material there, under a dredging alternative, or dam removal, how would we deal with invasives, right? That would wanna go into that wetland potentially. How does that work? Questions on dam removal, people wanting to know what kind of financial support, can we get a ballpark estimate? These questions around Talbot Mills Dam, both what is the progress on that, and the impact. These questions around fisheries that we've heard, right? Some, just a general question, around, why in this analysis is seen as superior to have different fish and wildlife come in as opposed to what's been in the pond for 150 years. What is the budgeting cost for reestablishing the acres of wetlands? What does the restoration process look like? How can we mitigate impacts on Scout Island's accessibility? Or what's the more concrete proposal for how to make that happen? And then just generally some issues around history and trust, right? So people just questioning about the origins of this report and the way that it was contracted and the mandate that was given to EA, right? So why did this happen when dredging was already identified? We've got a town meeting. Why didn't they use Envision Concord? Why are there certain inaccuracies in the report that some people observed? Right, and you can see those noted in the comments. And then generally other information that people wanted about the alternatives. So on the no action alternative, can we get upkeep costs and expenses, right? What is that actually looking like to understand how that's progressing? Can we understand what's happening with sediment deposits in the northwest area of the pond? The comment that it seems to be filling in. Is that kind of a long-term thing that's going to continue? How safe is the dam? On dredging, the potential for a fish passage or ladder, right? Could it be a good pond habitat for spawning alewife? Would actually be an ecological benefit to keeping the pond. Cost estimates for dredging coming up again and again. Different strategies for dredging, different project approaches coming up again and again. The impact of sediment removal on water quality more broadly coming up again and again. This question around mapping of the actual areas that are likely to be free of aquatic vegetation given slope. So Jeff, this is a comment you were making in the group a minute ago. Someone naming that in a public comment session, apparently, or maybe it was a comment in the documents, right? Public comment that was listed in the document that someone raising the potential of a state mandate around dam removal if Talbot Mills Dam is removed. No idea of that, if someone wants an answer. Questions on dam removal. Can we get information on the impact of property values? We actually have some information on that. We'll hear a little about it in a couple minutes. But that was a question someone asked. How likely is it that the diatomaceous fish will come? What is Scout Island going to look like if the dam is removed? What are the downstream impacts of dam removal, both during the process and afterwards? How do we know about changes in base flood elevations? What does that tell us? Finally, some questions around recreation. What do we want in terms of improved recreational improvements to this whole system? Right? Can we evaluate the alternatives against what we want? Can we understand more about the tax burden of actions beyond the $3 million budget? That's something that we want to recommend. And then a question on community engagement, which is, can we do better community engagement and have meetings where we're not engaging just a subset of the population that is especially interested in this, but get a kind of broader input on how members of the community would see various alternatives. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
You did awesome.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
It's something I thought about in the report, they mentioned that this report wasn't the place for all of the survey data, but is it possible for us to get a copy of all of the survey data, not just like the committee by chart social ones? From the surveys that have gone out informing this, there was it's like March 20.
Yes, so it's very clunky.
Okay,
So it's basically a massive Excel spreadsheet, but I'm happy to.
yeah,
share
I
that.
did, just to, I mean, I was thinking of it when you were the discussion about like how many people, like the whole survey data set was available, so.
Yes,
Hmm.
I don't know if anybody is better at Excel than I am, or if there's an easy way to put it into a format that's more, I've looked at it and it's very clunky, but I'm happy to send it.
Okay.
I would just, this is just a final capture sort of question after this. Is there anything that's been mentioned in the sort of second half of this? Reporting out of the summary of the, of your responses and what Toby has talked about in the comments that you've heard from each other. Is there anything that particularly resonates or something that, I don't know, is six or eight? Or is it sort of all of it?
I'm not sure that if resonate is the right word, but of all those questions, I think getting accurate dredging costs seems to be at the crux of it.
It's the cost.
It's really the center of where we go. Because we can afford to dredge a lot more and dispose it properly. Maybe it takes care of a lot of things. I don't know, so that, I mean, I think the cost of dredging, it's one of my top three information.
Dredging cost of the.
Yeah.
The impact on the nutrient issue, will help infant disposal, that piece is kind of related to that. So
Okay, great. Anyone else? Think we were you well with the information dump, the data dump.
Sorry.
Hey, it's necessary. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, you all, it's up to you. I mean, I think that we can get through the next piece pretty quickly. Don't worry about it, but we can often move on.
so we're on lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think I can share, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to share?
David, do we have something to show them?
David,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, as I'm listening to things here, I think what you're saying, for instance, getting more information, I think will be good and all, but I can't help but thinking when we have all this information, we still have to have criteria by which we'll make a decision. And I wondered if earlier in the process, and then there was a certain number of criteria that say everybody agrees to these criteria. And then this another set of criteria, nobody agrees to. And, can we categorize to say what's really important? To try to find that out. I don't know if it makes any sense, but right now, it's just, they aren't categorized and I don't know what we're trying to get to as a commonality of criteria, or if we have real divisions in what is what does success look like? Because at least from what I think of it, from what I'm hearing from my scouting community, it's not black and white, dam, no dam, dredge, no dredge. It's, the biggest concern is, will we have the same type of access to Scout Island, and will it maintain integrity of the island experience? And everything I'm hearing is like, it might be possible with, any one of these.
Have to rename it Scout Hill.
That's a question for us.
Yeah.
Well, my question, the question is it possible for us now or soon to establish, certain criteria? It's like, well, everybody agrees that we want this goal met
Right.
out of it. That might actually direct us as we're evaluating things a bit more.
So what do you mean, David, going through, excuse me, the Envision Concord maybe, through all the areas of Envision Concord to see where dam removal or dredging or nothing?
I guess I'll use my example of survey, is that, does anybody feel that it's a reasonable criteria that, there be an access point for canoes that you can pull a trailer up to, not hard top where you have to carry it down, but we have a trailer of 8 canoes for us to have our scouting experience on the island, and that we could pull the trailer up and we can paddle across. And, I don't know if the far end of the island, what is it, the south end of the island, if it's not actually an island, or I don't know that matters so much, because we stay on the north end of the island. And so if I put that out as, hey, that's an important criteria, no matter which we do, that will be very important to the scouting criteria, the scouting.
Yeah, and that's good to spend. I wanted to just clarify.
Yeah,
questions. I'm a little
Coming
confused.
back to what I said before, didn't we define the criteria according to the exercise?
Yeah.
Where then, right now, we have a set of criteria. So this is what we're going after in different options and scenarios have the different kind of sub items or description items. So for me, this is not a criteria. For me, this falls within probably 1.1 or 1.2 of the criteria we have, where it goes around, let's say, the character and the experience that this provides. This is not a standalone criteria where we measure all scenarios against it. It falls into one of the, say, pluses or minuses in that, let's say, I think it's 1.1, 1.2, where we talk about the character and the experience of that area. So I would just, I feel this is very granular.
It's very grainy, right?
Yeah, which
Yeah.
falls into that, so I rather would have actually say that if you look at these criteria that are defined. And we are looking at the different scenarios, where do we need more information, or what is the metrics we are building along, we build one axis. Now we have to build the other things, what do we need in the dredging scenario, if we go through these kind of, how many are these? 10 or so criteria. Yeah, if we go to that, what do we need to know for dam removal along the 10 criteria? What do we need to do on the do nothing along the 10 criteria? And what are the elements of filling in the granular elements
At that time.
Yeah, so that, but it's not a separate
And
criteria.
Yeah, go ahead, Malcolm, then I want.
so when we, as a subgroup, put together the proposed criteria, we specifically put Scout Island in as a, you know, a key issue that must be considered in both 1A and B. So I think that is covered somewhat in that we can't just ignore the
Right, and I guess
access.
what I'm wondering is it helpful to us to know that everybody agrees that that's an
So-
open criteria?
So, yeah, I mean, I guess you're, I think the question as I see it is, should we return to discussing the criteria doc in a more formal way?
Or does the
right?
criteria represent what we all agree is,
Yeah.
everybody agrees 100% in all those criteria?
Right,
I thought they were just ideas we were putting
Right,
down
right.
as criteria. I
Right,
didn't know that we had all said, yeah, all those criteria matter the most.
right, that's a fair point, I think we thought we'd gotten kind of far enough on that, so maybe there seemed to be general agreement, but we didn't do any kind of formal piece on that, yeah.
Well, as one of the co-creators of the criteria, looking at them, I always felt that we needed some weighting of the criteria. Which category is more important? And this may be a painful categorization, but you know, we have character, we have recreation, we have ecology, and we have cost,
Right,
at least those four. I don't think one's, and then we have, access to Scout Island, it's a separate important category. So are those all in harmony, or are they conflicting? And I think at some point,
Yeah.
we have said, what's the most important one or two to look at?
so I'm gonna put a little pause on it, I think we're getting a little bit into procedural rabbit hole, which I appreciate is important issue.
But Bruce had a sense.
Okay, yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
It kind of comes around to the whole thing of, just sort of an observation. Is that I'm hearing a lot of things around the idea of, you know, resistance to change, looking back at it, and I think in order, not procedural, but thinking about moving forward, is if we have smaller groups and right before we go do our work, we review the criteria. Or just have it reminded to us, so that we're going back into the groups with those right on the tip of our tongue. Because that way we actually get to laying everything we do out to it. I also think that, you know, one of the things that just occurred to me as I was sitting here is how are we thinking about this? And the impact of the future, not now, but the future, beyond our lifetimes, maybe even beyond our grandchildren's lifetimes, great-grandchildren's lifetimes. And the fact that there are plenty of models that are out there, NOAA doing a lot of them around climate resilience and climate change. And that those things can be layered within all of those decisions and looking at that, so we can see if we do this, this is what it could look like. If we do this, this is what it could look like. If we do this, this is what it could look like. Because I think it really sort of comes back down to, you know, we're making a decision today or within this time period that has huge impact on the future or even the existence based on the resilience of how we go forward. So it really sort of gets to that whole point of coming back to the criteria and making sure each group is going into that and being very clear of what our objectives are. And also being able to take in, you know, because I was like, you know, it's like our human experience, our personal, our emotions, all based on where we live within this, where we are within this, you know. I was sort of sitting here as I was thinking about it, I was like, wow, this place probably changed. If my ancestor from 300 years came through, they'd be like, what the hell happened? You know, and that's how we have to think about it. It's like, you know, if we walked into 300 years from now, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So I think just to maybe make a suggestion on this point moving forward, I think we are very happy, and I think it seems like it'd be helpful to just do a little, we're not gonna do this now, but a little status check on what people feel about the criteria, right? We've done some revisions that were sent around, we got comments. So we'll do that between this meeting and the next, and just make sure there's no kind of huge objections to how those are laid out, okay? And then I think, Bruce, your point here is well taken, right? That let's remind ourselves of those criteria as we go into these work groups. It's an important kind of North Star, right? As we begin that work, right? And likewise with the kind of long-term arc of history, right, in our minds. And then I think, Paul, just to address your point around weighting the criteria.
Yeah, maybe a rabbit hole, but I think as we look at it, we have to individually in this
Yeah.
group, which we
So-
can't satisfy everyone.
Yeah, so if you look at the document, the most recent one we sent out, I don't want to get into this now, but it has a suggestion for how we might deal with different preferences around how people weight different criteria, and that's the question we're gonna have to wrestle with as a group. So I wanna move us forward to a couple more issues on the agenda, because we do have some important things to talk about with respect to next steps. So I just wanna share this issues with you on the screen here. We're not gonna spend much time on this right now. But I just want to show you that we've kind of continued to try to refine what we see as the questions related to the core issues on the table that we as a group seem to be focusing on and want to address and clarify moving forward. And this document that we're trying to keep relatively concise, but focus on those key questions, is our effort at synthesizing this. It will be revised again after today, as we've heard already, right? But I just want to orient you to this so that you can understand what is in it, and feel free to provide us with written comments on it, with an understanding that this was before this meeting, before we integrated the comments from today, okay? So we have some questions around overall background, which is just what do these alternatives actually look like in practice, and basically suggesting that for each of the alternatives, we make sure that everyone has clarity on what they're gonna look like, right? What restoration mitigation actions are necessary, right? Clarity on how the dam currently operates, its capabilities, condition, maintenance needs, etc. On the no action alternative, these are questions getting to the impacts of no action. How quickly is the system going to degrade? What are the ecological, recreational, and financial implications of what you see? So we have some questions around ecology, financials, and for each of these, we also, or for many of them at least, we offer some ideas of how a work group might answer those questions. Those are suggestions, but we thought it would be worth just putting them in front of you. We have questions on dredging. What are the broader impacts of dredging on ecology, recreation, and town finances? We have questions around ecological impacts, project design and implementation. We know that is key, right? What would it cost? What could we feasibly do? Questions around recreation and climate resilience and financing, and then some suggestions on how to answer them. Likewise with dam removal. Questions on ecology, recreation, project design, climate resilience, and finances, and some suggestions about how to answer them. And then we thought, well, we have those three topics, and we could assign work groups to those alternatives, but then there seemed to be, in some ways, sort of a different way of looking at some of these topics that's cross-cutting, which is around recreation, right? How can we think about each alternative and its impact on the broader recreational opportunities and needs of the area, considering the future, considering the broader system. So we thought it could be useful to have a work group looking at that issue in a cross-cutting way, right? Trying to define the needs of the system, possible benefits. And then likewise with history and character. How will each alternative impact the water body's role in contributing to the distinctive history and character of the area? And we think it's important to look both at the history of Concord and West Concord's identity, history, character, but also related to broader history, longer term history around Indigenous culture. So we've named both of those as issues that have come up. And then there's some questions around short-term treatment approaches, which we basically say are, you know, what's the role of these, if any, in these longer term solutions, right? And how they changed from the 2012, what we knew in 2012, right? Which is when they were really last dealt with in depth. So that's this document. You have it in your inbox, and feedback on it is welcome. We'll revise it based on today. And we can have more discussion about it next week when we really are setting off into work groups. Okay. So should we move forward or take questions on that? What do you, anyone have any quick questions we can resolve or concerns about documents? Yeah.
On the cross-cutting issues, you have recreation character.
Yeah.
Why not have ecology and costs as well as cross-cutting?
Yeah, so we were thinking with the finances that is probably something that we can get clarity from the town, and we might not need a work group to do a lot of research into it. Right, but it's definitely a cross-cutting issue, right?
Yeah, we talked earlier about getting, having a video working, look at the cost for dredging.
Right.
Because if there could be different parameters, how much do you
Right.
dredge, et cetera, et cetera.
There's also questions
Yeah.
around grants for both.
Yeah. So, sorry, I think I misspoke a little bit. There is within, we didn't do financing as a cross-cutting issue. We thought there might be some cross-cutting questions that the town can clarify for us. Otherwise, it's like helping, it's in each thing. Okay, it's in each. So some of the ecology, likewise, we've done it by alternative. Because our thinking is basically that understanding the ecology impacts of dredging or dam removal is a big project in itself. We can't have a group. It's gonna be a lot for longer to do all of that, basically thinking. Different experts, right, different research. Right, so that's the thinking, but if you have other suggestions about ways to cut it up, this is just our.
Yeah, it's our intent, it's
Yeah.
our take to try to break this up into sort of manageable portions and in topics and sort of concepts that sort of make sense bundled together. And to have you all as the members dive into them in work groups, and you're not limited to the questions that we're asking, right? You're gonna go where you wanna go. One of the things that I see happening is that there's a lot of interest among you all, just in the conversation that we've had today and in the past about sort of designing it, getting into the nitty gritty about where, what exactly would it look like, or how could, where could the sediment be deposited, and, PFAS and contaminants, and that some of the questions that we're asking are a little bit higher level than that, a little bit broader, because this is the way that I look at it is the work group questions are a way for the work group to go and dig into this and try to find some commonality amongst yourself, and then be able to come back to the larger group to say, look, this is how we thought about it, and this is why. And just as the envision, was it the envision or the criteria group where you reported back, I remember Vicky saying we kind of got all spiraled, right? And then we came back and, and then we figured it out. And that kind of process is really helpful to the whole group. So we know that we may not have asked every question, but we're not limiting you to looking at more.
Can I ask, I'm not 100% sure how this fits in, but it feels to me as though we have to do something special to reach out to the community in general to get their input in a way that they're actually engaged. And it's very clear that no matter what the people who were working on this beforehand felt that they were doing, the community didn't feel engaged over this 2023 thing. And it feels to me that we've probably got the expertise in this. I don't know how many other ex-academics there are, or current academics there are, but we could easily set up both qualitative and quantitative analysis and work with the community, especially if there are all of these work groups. informed by questions that the work groups have, to then be able to take ideas and either run them by the community or to get general community input. Which feels to me we ought to be doing that upfront, not after we've all had a lot of time to start to set our own ideas in stone.
Yeah. Do you want to speak? I mean, this is actually a nice segue. If you want to,
Yeah, well, we're skipping through the
yeah, we can
outside.
do that first.
Few outsides.
Oh, well, whatever, however you want to do it, yeah.
So in terms of the public information, we've been talking about that with the planning group as well, about how to do that. So we want to do a public information session in June. That's what we're kind of aiming for. And we don't have an exact date. We want to give people enough time to plan for it, and we want to try to hit the time before everyone takes off for the summer. And I guess school ended really early this year. We were kind of thinking. June 14th. Yeah, so yeah, and yet, and I think we've heard I think Bert told us that we really need to have at least 2 weeks notice of people to have a chance, at least. So it's very
I think that's minimum.
So this first meeting would really be about informing the resident about the work of the task force. Here we are, this is what we're doing. It's really very much a general information session about what we're doing, what the approach is, and get some feedback. And then there'd be a sort of a short presentation, probably by our chair people, and then take comments and bring them back to the task force. And that would be the first, foot in the water to start this process. And then later down the line, we would do another session that would be more in depth. So the meeting would be really run by the chairs, and CBI, one or both of us would facilitate the conversation. So that's what we're aiming for. Yes, go ahead.
So that's this public information. I think it doesn't quite get to Malcolm's
No.
point though, right? I think it's worth noting, this is not that,
Right.
right? This is informing the public of what we're doing. It's hopefully will generate attention, right? Make sure people feel they have an opportunity to learn about it, share their perspectives. We will bring back what we hear to this group, right, after the meeting. But I think you raised an important question about other ways to get public input. That session is going to be the people who are interested, right? Are there ways to kind of test these alternatives in some way, right, that is actually useful in a different way from the public input that has already happened? Or we've seen there 50 meetings, there are lots of notes, and the EA report on that. There's a survey, right? Different opinions on how helpful or valuable that is. So I just want to say, Malcolm, I think it's a great question. It's at this point an open question, and definitely if task force members are interested in designing something and sort of managing something, right, as a work group, to get high quality input on some of the core questions, that's, certainly definitely something that can happen.
The best resource for that is
It's you all, yeah.
I have a suggestion is to consider, I'm glad you're gonna do this public forum or public
Yeah.
hearing. But moving beyond what the task force is doing, you might think of using that to break into little groups. To spend a half hour on maybe several topics so people can have conversations rather than sort of ask questions, so you can you might start to get that input. Some breakout sessions, depending on, if you have an hour and a half.
Yeah.
That's
Hearings,
something we do.
It's definitely something
Yeah.
to do. I was actually envisioning it for the next meeting,
Yeah.
but I think some of it just depends on how much we have to say and kind of if we can gauge what the response is.
I agree, but since the clock is ticking and it's likely we would have a second meeting until the fall.
Yeah.
That's coming pretty close to where we have to move forward on deliberations.
I think ideas are welcome, and think on it and let us know what you have for ideas.
I think the briefing sounds like a great idea, and I just reminded the Girl Scouts have requested a briefing, and I don't know if you wanna just do a redux of that to them, or if you wanna invite them, which of course they would be, as members of the community invited, but I don't know that it would be as great an experience for them to I don't know, in terms of asking questions, would they, you know, it wouldn't be as a. I don't know, it'd be educational for them to see how. The world operates
Yeah.
too, so I can see
Yeah,
that,
I think
but
it's better.
just let's remember that as a
Right.
constituent and
Yeah.
how you wanna handle.
Yeah.
We should specifically invite, I mean,
Yeah.
and we might as well the Boy Scouts. would-
Right, can you be the,
Oh, yeah,
on-
yeah,
Yeah.
I just need to know, yes, yeah, we're gonna do something separate or do invite them to that meeting or whatever you tell them.
all right, so a couple of things. So we've seen overall support from everybody, and we talked about it again today about having some experts come in. And we are working on that. So we've begun identifying actual people to come. One would be a dam removal expert to come in and talk about dam removal, what it's like, the nuts and bolts. Potential, hopefully some comparable situations where you could see photographs or graphs about other dam removal projects on maybe somewhat similar small streams, what they look like before and after. Someone had also raised, having the people who live on, you know, at the site to reflect on what it was like for them, and that's quite possible. If we, you know, depending on the network of who worked on a project at a consultancy or through, you know, a government agency, and who do they know, and would, you know, reaching through and through. Any of you have contacts with people who are on a comparable stream that where a dam was removed, we would be happy to know about that. But the comparability is really an important. So we're working on that. We're looking at EA to be the source to answer methodological questions about the 2023 report and to present on it. And that's understanding that some of you, I mean, I think everybody to some extent, it has raised some questions about the reliability of the information that EA presented. And we think, you know, that there are ways to balance that with your own knowledge about what you're learning now. You've got more information and more understanding of what the different alternatives that EA looked at entail, and that you should be able to handle that. And we will continue to look for other consultants or engineering firms to come in to present on the aspects of dredge, depending on what your questions are and what's kind of left. But EA is like an obvious starting point since they're already in contract with the town. So that's kind of where we're at. We're looking at ESS, or another dredging contractor or a dredging consultant, or an engineering consultant, could also come in to do something similar. And that would be like a dual, you know, a comparable. And there are also private consultants in the wetlands consulting world that have worked on a lot of these projects. And it's quite possible that we could have one or two of them come in to talk about this from the wetland science side, which can be more, it gives you a different window than just the engineering side of these types of projects. Yes,
I think a contractor would be great too.
yes.
We have a panel situation.
You mean like the actual dredge contractor?
Yeah, it's good.
Dam removal dredges, the companies would probably, I'm sure we can find a company that has experience.
Maybe. I really don't know. I mean, I really don't know. Could be ones are chartered.
Some kind.
Yeah, so maybe there was.
TF4, I mean, there's a lot, but I think, you know, I'm hearing this, you know, ESS and dredge contractors and, you know, that's money,
It's money,
you know,
right?
that's money.
Right,
that's-
they would charge.
That's right, so that's just something that.
It's also, you know, it also does raise the question of. What is it, you know, thinking about what is it that you want to know? And it's kind of hypothetical, speculative versus how much per yard does it cost to do X? You make it.
Right, and I think,
So it's hard.
right, I mean, I think just maybe, I'm just sort of thinking out loud, because, you know, when we do, you know, just as the town does procurements, you know, if there's a certain process that we have to go through, their best business practices that we can use if it's under a certain amount. But the more we're sort of like pulling in different contractors and different consultants, it's going to get complicated very quickly. And it's also going to be very time. So I think we need to just be mindful.
Well, and one of the complications that I think, I'm certainly aware of in going out and talking to some of these folks is that we don't want to put them in a position where they are conflicted, so that they can't bid, right? That they can't offer the services. So we have to be very cognizant of that as well.
You may want to reach out to DCR's Office of Dam Safety. They most likely would charge you to come in and speak freely
On,
on any type of dam issue. Either removal or.
yeah, I already have some contacts.
Sorry, it is an ecological restoration.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe
So
somebody
the work-
for Army Corps
So we
could come and speak about dredging.
yeah, or do DP, if you're gonna do regs, you should do both agencies. So anyway, we're hearing you and we're searching for these people, and we're inviting you, if you've got ideas, you've got contacts, let us know. Let's see, oh, we also want to ask for more research support on the Envision Concord criteria. I don't know if that's still. That was an item and a want early on when we were diving into the Envision Concord document. There were suggestions made about having someone who worked on that come in and talk to the group about their thinking. That's another area that if you want that, then let us know. We can work with the planning team to identify that person. I'm seeing different faces around the room, so maybe that's not a hot topic right now. So I'll just put it out there. So moving on to the site visit, thank you, Keith, Jeff, C, and Malcolm for helping to organize that. And it looks like the best date and time for this under the survey was Saturday, May 25th from 9 to 12.
This Saturday.
This coming Saturday, the beginning of Memorial Day weekend. So it doesn't work for everyone, we already know that, so we wanted to see if it's possible to arrange another time as well for a second visit.
I am curious how many people can make it.
I don't know.
I think it's 6 yes and 1 maybe.
Six yes is one.
Yeah,
So I mean, it would be helpful to have a second
yeah.
date, so I don't know if we can survey for that, for a date.
So who can't make it this Saturday? Can't, and would be interested in another date. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think we should, we're gonna do, we'll do this, because I think it's a
Let's
good
go
class
with
of
what we
people.
got, yeah.
We got it, but we're gonna aim up to another one too.
Can I just make I mean, we can get this posted by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is Wednesday, right? So yes, we can get it posted tomorrow. But would there be interest if there's not a whole group going? Does everybody want to have like a cohesive group? Or is
Right.
just do it on one day in the future or like the near future?
I mean, I'll just say based on the survey, I think it's gonna be hard to find a time.
Could weeknights be included? Would that
It's up to.
open it up to, people's timeframes?
It's 2 days, now that it's like late.
Like to have a drone. Well,
That'd be cool.
we have drones, so we can do that. if you want.
Yeah, that's something cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know, again, Rachel, would it be helpful for those of us who can't make it Saturday morning to got our names and look back at our returns now, maybe?
Okay, so it was Jeff, Van, Liz, you read?
The meetings kind of depends on when I can make it happen potentially if I needed to, but.
Okay, Malcolm, you're,
My son just called, just before this meeting, he called to say he's flying over from Portland, and will be here Saturday morning.
okay.
So, I totally unexpected, so I wouldn't mind changing my.
And then Paul, you were in, Gillian. And Mark, Bruce is in, wow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's 8 of us on minutes. I think try again.
We'll
Try
keep-
again.
We can
Yeah.
keep the one,
Well, do
Or
it,
not.
I mean,
I didn't know, I was.
Is it possible just to go by show of hands now, like some of the other options, so that we could?
I mean-
decide?
There was, yeah, I mean, we could try.
Yeah. It's faster.
All right, so, you wanna do that, sure, I mean, why not, so we have,
Go ahead.
So. You always think about, the impact on how many people is gonna be out there and why
Yeah.
not do it two groups. As long as whoever's setting up this tour does exactly the same.
Yeah.
for Each group,
That's what I was,
those who can do it this week go, and those who can't, we try to
Mhm.
coordinate a schedule to be able to do it. Because all the dates that were set up for me, not one of them. works.
yeah.
I mean, how does that sound? How does that sound for the people who are gonna be leading this? Would you be willing to do a duplicate? Is it?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be possible to get us all in one place at one time. Happy to, tag team or whatever, and I think if the purpose is for more people to have eyes on more of these key locations and we're not gonna engage and deliberate, have a committee conversation out there, then we can do multiple outings, we can tag team sort of, we can coordinate on what are the main points that we want to have people see. Could even boil it down to it, choose your, got a self-guided walk.
Choose your
Go to these places
Right.
and here's, make sure you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of these things while you're at this point.
I don't think.
I mean, Yeah, I don't think we can, I don't think we can do it right now, but I'll just say like, right now, we're at, I mean, it was, I think, 6 yeses and 1 maybe, I think we're down to like 4 yeses. And yeah, 4 yeses, I think, so, I don't know, yeah,
That's rescheduled.
yeah. So,
So no for this Saturday.
No,
I think so,
I think
yeah,
so.
yeah,
I think we were also being optimistic about how much time we could all commit to this. and
Yeah.
have a nice school together, so we could, we could make it an hour and get on bikes, so we can make it, 90 minutes and sort of.
Right.
yeah,
So then we'll send out another.
send it another poll, so sorry, I didn't, yeah,
Maybe we'll include some other times, that just weekends. Are people
Yeah.
open to that if it was an evening?
Is it possible to attach at the end of our meeting, next meeting, just to go over to the pond for an hour? Say it's 7 o'clock,
That might not be enough time.
not enough time?
Mosquitoes.
All right.
Stumbling back.
It's a fun.
Okay, so the sense in the room is that the 25th is canceled, unless you want to go on your own, and we'll send out another poll, and look for dates, and we'll try some more options and see if we can get something going, and if we ends up with groups that end up on 2 dates, if the leaders are willing to do that, then we'll just go with 2 different times.
Yeah.
Because the main thing is to get people out there and see it.
I have a question. We don't have a forum. We don't have to post it. right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So if anyone would like, has free time and would like to check in, you can contact me. I will be available to walk around the pond
on Saturday morning,
anytime.
anytime, okay.
Well, can go on Saturday?
Who would like to go on Saturday?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the other alternative dates are.
Right, yeah,
I
but you can go.
can be present.
I can also go, and I just gonna, yeah,
That's all I miss.
but yeah, not much, no, yeah.
Okay, I just.
Well, that's what I mean, like, if you really wanna go.
Yeah, no,
It would help,
Yeah.
do that.
So the next important thing is the future task force meeting schedule. So right now we have meetings scheduled June 13th, July 2nd, July 30th. That's it. We haven't put anything else on the calendar. One question we had is whether we should change the July 2nd date and move it later in July and then still have 2 meetings in July. How do you feel about August? Right, oh, yeah, the July 30th, that's Bill can't make it. I don't know if there are other people who can't make it. And then going forward, right, are we looking for dates?
I think should we meet in August? I think.
Should we meet in August is really the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Are people willing to meet in August?
Sure.
Okay, and is it better toward the beginning of August or the and I think, well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And we'll do what we can do. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, then. It's looking like people are willing to do that. Yeah, it would be helpful, I think, for the group to keep going. Okay. Would you be willing to meet twice in August?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, okay,
All right,
all right, we'll see what.
We'll see.
Around July 2nd also, 'cause that is, like, I don't,
I'm sorry,
did you say something about maybe scheduling July 2nd?
I didn't know if July 2nd was a date that people were gonna be away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are people gonna be away July 2nd?
Like,
Yeah.
How many people are gonna be away July 2nd? Okay. Well, like 5 people.
yeah.
Would you be willing to join virtually? Or is that-
Right, we could do virtual,
Yeah.
Some people still can.
but some also can't. So we may poll,
Yeah,
that.
okay.
Okay, we need to run that.
All right, we need to wrap up. I'm just gonna name our next steps and we'll move forward. Site visit canceled. Okay, next meeting is June 13th at Keys Road, 5 p.m. We're gonna hopefully have some experts and some Q&A with them. And then we plan to convene our work groups for the first time. So we're going to share with you a little poll on the work groups, see what you're interested in, which work group you're interested in being part of. So please respond to that, okay? So we can get into those work groups, or at least have, you know, more easily be able to get into them when we meet. That will not be like a binding. Sure, everyone's good with the group, but we want to have some good guys coming in. We'll be planning this public meeting, so we welcome your input on that, as we as a planning team moves forward, getting that set up. We'll again send out a meeting feedback form for you, and then we also just want to name, we've had a number of task force members come to us with resources, with readings that are relevant to the issues we've been talking about, and we just wanted to name them to you, so we're gonna send them out, we have no reason not to. We've got all been helpful, we'll look at them all. But we have some water quality data from Keith, if we wanna follow up with you on that briefly to sort of how to share that. But I think we plan on sending some water quality data that Keith has compiled out to the group. We have an Orange water temperature logger summary that Delia's identified that we can send out to the group. EA sediment sampling memo that we have that we can set up that gets to some of these sampling questions. There's a study on dam removal in Plymouth and the impact on housing value, so we can send out real estate prices, so we can send that out as well. Sven sent us a little YouTube video that sort of is a visual of how dams impact sediment dispersal and removal of dams, so we can just for a little thing, we'll send it out. And then there's, you know, similar issues going on in Ipswich. Paul, you said it's an article, so,
It voted today.
yeah, so we don't know what happened. I haven't seen it, yeah, but, if it'd be helpful, we can send that around as well.
I think get to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
At Ipswich also.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah,
Real life
Yeah.
experiences.
yeah,
Well, just also point out that that's like a main stem river, it's not
Yeah,
like saying,
very
it's not apples to apples, just to like,
Yeah.
keep that in mind when you read about
Yeah.
Ipswich River.
Right.
yeah, that's
It's a
important.
very good.
Right, Yeah, it's a day, it's a. pond
It's
that-
big
a
and-
river, supposed to.
Well, Ipswich River is flowing over the dam.
Yeah, right.
Looking forward to reading Keith's analysis of the ores data. I spoke with the scientist there, Ben Weatherall, who's always happy to share information. But he's also happy to come in and share his expertise as well.
Great. All right, so I'm gonna hand it back to our co-chairs.
So I guess it goes to me, and I just want to say, I want to acknowledge that I was, if you hadn't noticed, impatient at the last meeting at the end of the public comment session. And I recognize how important that time is for people to speak publicly, and I want them to feel free to speak that way. As long as they keep it within 2 minutes, as long as they do it with respect, and as long as there's no public attacks. So having said that, public comments, anyone have public comments? Yes.
I just want to say what I wanted to say last week.
You want to just identify yourself again for us, sorry.
Anna Pelvic, 43 Conwell Avenue, and I will just say that I'm sorry to end on a sour note, but these are negative comments. And I'm going to say them in less than 2 minutes. Revisiting the details of the RFP, as Keith Hannon did last meeting, is not going back over old relevant history. Because that RFP was based on a plan that proved unworkable, which was to dump the dredged area of the prison. As reflected by the fact that 17 contractors were originally interested and we got just one bid. And that was after the addendum saying that you could use other dumping sites. So when that single bid came in, 3 times higher than the amount of money that we had to spend on dredging, with almost half of it for disposal, the logical thing to do if one wanted to restore the pond would have been to stop, regroup, and consider other dumping options, including in-pond disposal and other sites on prison-owned land that weren't high security. In fact, it seemed that we probably could have actually dredged more of the pond and stayed within our original budget if we had done something like that. But instead, the NRC made essentially no serious attempt to revisit that RFP, and then made a completely unsupported policy pivot and started pushing aggressively for dam removal and pond destruction. This is a remarkable series of events because in 2018, the town voted to spend $3.5 million to develop Giroux and Orange Pond into a recreational facility that would be an asset to the town. It was NRC's mandate to oversee the pond restoration, and instead, now we've spent money on a dam removal project, on expensive mediators, and we're still spending money on that. My point is that the NRC has not yet fulfilled its responsibility to act on the original mandate. The NRC needs to understand that people are not on board with the way policies were changed and the agenda was changed. They're not on board with pond destruction, as was clear at every public meeting we've had so far, and from the fact that we were able to gather 1,000 signatures against it in a month without trying that one. The NRC, I think, owes it to voters to issue a new RFP that revisits dredging. And that this should absolutely be one of the task force recommendations, and this time it should be done with greater public oversight. And I don't think that dam removal deserves the full weight that dredging deserves to address some of the things that were said tonight, because the town voted for dredging. That's it. And
Anyone else?
Yes.
Miguel Chavari. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Miguel Chavari, 255 Commonwealth Ave. I'm the homeowner there. And so basically to echo some of what Anna had said, well, actually, first of all, though, is Paul had mentioned, I think, Bill, but you had also alluded to it, but the whole concept of getting more accurate dredging costs, you know, my public comment is that I do feel we need to explore that more. What Anna was saying too is, you know, if you look at the charge of this committee, it was basically formed because dredging was viewed as too expensive. And then we thus looked at other alternatives, but it's looking like dredging is not too expensive. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. And as Anna was saying, you know, we voted, you know, to dredge the pond. We voted to allocate funds, and we actually voted $5 million to acquire land to build a park because the pond was going to be dredged. So I want you guys to just kind of keep in mind, I think what Anna was referring to as the mandate, but town meeting, Concord citizens have already told you guys or everyone that they want this pond dredged. And when we thought dredging was too expensive, yeah, we were looking at other options, but now dredging doesn't seem too expensive. Anyways, though, so just to go back, yeah, please focus in on I'm looking at my notes here. Please focus in on getting on exploring those accurate dredging costs. So thank you very much. And Bill, thank you too. So
Thank you as well. Anybody else?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Diane. Diane.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Diane Hannon, 129 Nimrod Drive. I've been in a phone conversation with a specialist, Benjamin Sherman, who's the Marine Habitat Resource Specialist for NOAA, the New England branch. And my question to him was, do all dams really need to be removed? And he said, well, you have to look at all the possible solutions and choose the option that's best for people and fish. So this is from an expert. And he said that what would work with the Warner's Pond Dam, because it's not that high, is to put progressive pools that the fish can make their way up. It's not a fish ladder, it's a little more amenable to fish passage. And that works very well. And Warner's Pond Dam is not at all a high dam. He said this progressive pools would work up to about 8 feet, and I think the Warner's Pond Dam is under 5. So just a thought while you're looking for expert commentary on whether the dam needed to be removed. It seems not. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, good, thank you.
Since there's no other business in front of the task force.
Just did have one comment before you adjourn.
Yes.
So I did request to present my slides to the CPC, and I submitted a request to Ann to submit that to the chairperson. So just want everyone to be aware, and because I don't want to violate the no surprises clause we have. So I haven't heard anything back, but I was gonna update everyone with their feedback if I received it, but I haven't heard anything back. So just.
I have a quick question. Why would you, because you're not asking for funds, so what do you?
No, because the CPC funded for approximately 50% of the dredging project, and I doesn't seem like they're fully aware of why the pivot the way it occurred based on like the cost to dredge was not totally made clear. So it's just a request.
It's very full basketball team since I kind of graduated from college, but I did get your email today and I forwarded it to the planning committee, because that's how we agreed to address requests at the beginning of this process. Right, that everything goes through the planning committee, so that we should check it down and I'll let you feedback and see how you want to handle it, whether, you know, I wasn't available, I wasn't at the last meeting either, so I don't know what was said and whether it does represent the views of the whole community or one member, and I think we all agreed to speak with one voice. So I just wanted to make sure that, again, that we're all on board and no surprise.
I think the CPC does know why, in general, why the pivot was made. I think largely they were unaware of the details of the RFP, but I think the CPC has said to Delia and the task force to work out the next steps and status quo. So I don't think there's any action required of the CPC. I think the knowledge would be useful, but we wouldn't take any action on it necessarily. I'm speaking for myself, not for the chair.
Right, and I believe in the last meeting, they said, let the task force do its job. So.
Yeah, that's right.
So-
Let the task force do the job.
But just speaking for myself, but to what I mentioned earlier, to make a specific presentation by a task force member to another part of the town government feels that we're not presenting a balanced picture. Your public comment, being respected. The charge of this task force is to examine multiple options. But what we're doing is presenting multiple approaches to dredging. And I feel very uncomfortable with that. I'm sorry.
Personally, I feel comfortable too. I think your presentation last meeting was fantastic. So that's not the issue.
Nothing wrong.
Yeah, but I just don't know about going in and presenting on a dredging project, representing the committee without us having thought about it as a committee. But I thought your work you've done so far is really good, so.
If it helps the task force move forward, I don't think there's relevance right now to any other town committee other than our task force.
Right now.
So maybe just a suggestion, I think we've heard the input from folks. You've shared your feelings on it as a task force member, and I think the planning team has heard the request and the concerns, and we can try and deal with that and make a decision.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay.
Any other comments then? Okay, then the meeting is adjourned at 7:25.